Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. Barcelona have agreed personal terms with Athletic Bilbao for winger Nico Williams. But how can they actually afford him? And which other players are Barca looking to bring in this summer? So with us today for this one, we have the Athletic's Barcelona correspondent, Paul Ballus, and writer of the Athletic FC newsletter, Phil Hay as well. Good to have you with us, gents. Paul, let's start with you. Nico Williams, look, a player that's been linked with several clubs, but it seems Barcelona is the club he has set his eyes on. The big question is, how close are Barca to actually getting him as a player?
I think it's very likely. As you said, the personal terms are well agreed. There's a verbal agreement in place. And when you speak to sources that are close to the dressing room, basically they take it as a done deal. They know that Nico wants to play there, that it's the number one priority, and that most importantly, he's willing to take all the caveats that it takes to join Barca and the potential registration issues that we've seen in the past. This is something that he was a bit afraid of last summer, and basically the main reason why he didn't join Barcelona last summer. But now it seems, it is the fact that he is willing to go through all this. That's what the player and his camp has told Barcelona. And that's the main reason, basically, why Barcelona said, okay, then we are going to go back for you. Because if you asked any executives at Barcelona, or even like people close to the president, in March or April this season, when you asked about Nico Williams, they said, no, we are not going to go after him because he wasn't too involved in joining us last summer. And for any player that wants to play for Barcelona, we really need to see that he really wants to join Barcelona. And Nico Williams wasn't on those levels last summer, but he is now, and he has been willing to take a step and let the club know that this is thinking now. And that's why, in the end of the day, I think that this is going to be done, because there's a lot of boxes that are ticked with Nico Williams, because he fits with the football profile that Barca are looking for. He fits really well with the dressing room. He's best mates with basically everyone in that dressing room. And that's what Deco is looking for. So basically, I think it's just a matter of time and just all the formalities to be completed, which is not a minor thing at Barcelona, as we all know in this podcast.
Yeah, and Paul, look, Barcelona are a team that have got issues around salary. The release clause is around £50 million for Nico Williams. But from what we're hearing and what we've reported, his salary is also quite high as well, isn't it?
So basically, the deal here is that Nico Williams has to be signed on a one-off payment, which is the release clause, as you mentioned, £50 million release clause. It has to be paid one-off, and that's has been seen in the past in recent transfer windows as a hurdle for other Premier League clubs or even Barcelona. Now it's not seen as a hurdle. It's something that Barca can afford. It's not seen as a huge obstacle, something that Barca can do. And they accept that if they want to sign Nico Williams, you have to do this, because at Athletic Club, they don't want to negotiate. So Barca say that they are fine with it. The most problematic thing with Barcelona is the salary limit that they have, because we enter here in a dodgy grey area, grey territory with La Liga Barcelona. The full information is never fully disclosed until the transfer window ends. So it's something that we try to be careful with. But yeah, just to lay out the picture here, La Liga is saying that Barca are now spending more than the salary limit that they have been set with. So basically that means that they need to offload current salaries to let new ones coming in. And Barca, basically, they expect to be saving salaries with the forthcoming weeks of the transfer window. They have already done some job regarding to this, because they have sold Alex Valle to Como permanently. That's one salary that is gone, plus a transfer fee that raises the income. They've cashed in money for Jean-Claude Todibo, who signed for West Ham. Barca had a sell-on clause in there. They have said Clement Lenglet's salary. His contract has been terminated with the club and he has joined Atletico de Madrid. And there's other minor names such as Alex Collado, Unai Hernandez. So there's bits and bobs in there. And Barca have the expectation to keep saving money with other contracts. We're going to speak about them later, I'm sure about this, but with names such as Marc-André Ter Stegen or Ansu Fati, those are names that are on the departure list in the club, and they hope that with this sort of work, Barca are going to be in a position that La Liga will allow them to register both Nico Williams and Joan Garcia, the goalkeeper that they signed last week as well.
Yeah, Phil, this is so fascinating for me because, Barca have had issues registering players. We think about the Dani Almo incident last year. I mean, how sustainable is it that they find themselves in these situations every time they want to hire a new player? They just keep kicking the can down the road. But how long for?
It's true, it's almost like an annual event of reading Paul's articles to find out what the latest levers are and what's being pulled next. And you do sort of assume that it can't be sustainable forever. But there is almost this scenario of Barca being too big to fail. No matter how severe the problems become and no matter how hard pressed they seem to be financially, they somehow seem to find a bit of wiggle room, which allows them to make these additional signings. And none of them are coming especially cheap. Olmo, Rafinha, Lewandowski, Koundé, Williams, as is about to be, they're all sort of roughly around the 40 million to 50 million pound bracket, or thereabouts anyway. Which, to be fair, is actually quite pedestrian these days when you see Wirtz going to Liverpool for 116 million. And I think it must be fairly safe to assume that Barca wouldn't have a prayer of getting a deal like that over the line at the minute. But they're certainly not spending peanuts. I mean, I can only judge from a distance, but from reading Paul's coverage and our Barca coverage more generally, I don't get the impression that Barca's reality is about to change anytime soon. I guess a new stadium will surely help when it comes to annual turnover and revenue and all of those things. But they seem to be in this perennial battle to balance the books, and I'm not sure what it is that's going to restore full financial order there, in the short term anyway. As you say, this scenario shouldn't really be sustainable, but this is Barcelona and they do seem to find a way. And more to the point, they found a way which has made them look like the best team in Europe last season, barring Paris Saint-Germain, which makes it a real paradox.
Yeah, I mean, the levers is the one, isn't it, Paul? We've spoken about the VIP seats they needed to offload. I think over 400 VIP seats needed to be offloaded for when people come to the Nou Camp in around September. How's that going?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because when there's a lot of people who are sort of making jokes to me which lever are Barca going to take this summer and stuff. I think that the most similar thing to a lever that will arrive to Barcelona this summer is that money from the VIP sitting sale. So basically this sale was done. It was done in January. Barca received the money from that sale. But the thing is that they weren't allowed to count that money in, because according to their audit company, basically these seats were not built yet, so they were not an asset yet. So you cannot count the money in for an asset that is not in the club's books, basically. So what Barcelona have done in recent months has been rushing to build all these VIP sitting seats at the Nou Camp Nou and making a top priority in their building process. And when you speak to the club now, they say and they believe that the club is in a good position to say that the VIP seats have already been built, and that when the club is ready to play back at the Camp Nou, these seats are going to be an asset. So this money that was cashed in January but could not be counted for budget purposes will be allowed to be counted by this summer. And this is going to, according to the club again, because you have to take it with a pinch of salt in every stage of the process, but according to the club, this is going to be a boost to the finances, to the salary limit, to the amount of money that they can spend. And yeah, this could be seen from the outside as one of those levers that we've seen in past years.
Yeah, I mean, Phil, look, Barcelona won the domestic double, La Liga, and also Copa del Rey last season, and also got to the semi-finals of the Champions League. You alluded to it earlier. Do you think that the success for Barca this season makes financial sense? But also, does it make sense that they've taken these risks? I also think that Barca are a fascinating team in that the name Barcelona holds a lot of weight. So it does tantalise a lot of players, doesn't it?
Oh, players do. There's no doubt. I remember when Rafinha was going from Leeds, it was Barcelona or nobody. Chelsea would have taken him. They would have made a financial deal much more easily than Barcelona were able to. But that was the only move that he wanted to make. I mean, it clearly is worth the risk in the short term, because the whole point of Barcelona's existence is to win trophies and to be the best they can be. And I don't think there's any doubting that the effort they made to sign Dani Olmo last season and to keep registering him despite the pressure from La Liga made a really big difference. It was worth the grind and worth the various battles that they had to fight. But I think that sort of question, is it worth it? Was it worth it? It probably needs to be asked with more hindsight. If no long-term harm comes to Barcelona, then clearly, the gambles are worth taking. 2 add 2 equals 4, doesn't it? But if somewhere down the line, Barca's refusal to cut the cloth and to tighten the belt and to properly sort themselves out does them really significant damage, then there really would be a debate to be had about whether the hand-to-mouth strategy was a sensible one and one they should have persisted with. Because supporters, as much as they love trophies, do tend to see trophies in a different context when the club runs into big trouble.
Yeah. Paul, how long can they keep kicking this can down the road? Because short term, yes, we understand it. It's just about working. And thank goodness you've got a coach like Hansi Flick there who can kind of manage what's going on with the board and also shielding the players in many respects. But we've spoken about this before. And I keep thinking, when on earth is it all going to fall apart? Because they are walking on a really thin line here.
Just like the general feeling here is, and not just in Barcelona, I'm talking about Spain, is that feeling that feel said here that Barcelona are like too big to fail. And in a way, what Laporta tried from the first minute since he was re-elected was to try to assemble the most competitive team that he could as soon as possible. And just, if the ball goes into the back of the net, then all the problems can get solved easily. That's just his thinking. And I mean, Laporte, of course, there can be a lot of reproaches and regrets that since his tenure at the club, but the sort of, I don't know if it's luck, it might be luck, but it's the sort of faith and belief that he had. And then he found the Lamine Yamal, found the Gavi, found these sort of players coming through the youth ranks out of nothing. It's just mad to see. And despite all the caveats that Laporta's tenure at the club can have, if you look at the team that he inherited and the team that Barca has now, I cannot see any fun next summer when elections come at the club, because there are going to be election next summer. I cannot see any fun voting against Joan Laporta, because the sort of a sporting dimension that he's given to a club that seemed to be really off it. It's something that it's basically going to convince all the fans that he's the right man to be in the place, despite at some point he might behave like, I don't know, some sort of bullish approach to the transfer window or how they want to sign players. At the end of the day, the results and what Barca has done, especially last season, has been something that Barca fans couldn't even expect last summer.
Yeah, Paul, as we're talking about money and we're talking about wages, what kind of wages is someone like Nico Williams going to command if he moves to Barcelona?
So basically what we've heard is that with the prospect of moving to Barcelona, Nico Williams is rejecting a contract extension at Athletic Club, which was about to place him as the best paid footballer in the club's history. People in Bilbao say that the sort of new contract should be around 10 million net per season. And basically Nico Williams is going to turn this down to go to Barcelona. And when you speak to Barcelona, they tell you, sources in the club, that the contract that he's expected to take is the same terms that they discussed last summer when Nico Williams was potentially gonna join the club, but he didn't eventually. And those discussed terms should be closer to 6 million net per season, which is a high salary, quite similar to the one that he's earning right now at Athletic Club with the current contract. But in a way, it's a salary that is in a balanced place in the Barcelona salary scale. It's what Barca can afford, and if Williams wants to join Barcelona, which is his top one priority, this is basically what he's gonna take. Of course, there's if you play for Barcelona in the commercial side of things, there's other ways to make more income, and potentially that's something that Nico Williams has in mind. But that's the terms that we've been informed from Bilbao and from Barcelona about what could happen in this signing of Nico Williams.
All right, let's talk about what kind of player Barcelona are going to be getting when it comes to Nico Williams. So let's bring in our data writer, Conor O'Neil. Conor, so good to have you with us. I mean, in true athletic style, we need to dissect this player. We all know what he looks like on the field, and he's a dazzling winger. He scores goals, he assists for club and country. But when it comes to recruiting a player like this, exactly what are his skill sets and what stands out about him?
Well, I think first and foremost is, like Yamal, he has that same ability to terrorise his fullback, taking him on. And he's only behind Yamal for take-ons per 90. So he's really aggressive in attacking the wide spaces. But on the surface of it, it's a bit of an odd transfer given that Barcelona have such attacking riches in these areas already. There's a good convincing argument that Rafinha and Yamal were the most convincing dynamic wide duo last season. Rafinha had the most goal contributions in any Champions League campaign ever, joint with Ronaldo. So by contrast, Williams had 6 goals. So it kind of seems like, well, on paper, to simply substitute in Williams for Rafinha, it doesn't really seem like there's room for him like that. But as we know, this Barcelona system with Flick, it's very fluid, very dynamic. And as Phil would know from his time covering Leeds, Rafinha is a wonderfully versatile player, comfortable across the whole width of the front line. And at Ellen Road, he was primarily a right winger. And started this season for Barcelona, last season for Barcelona, he was attacking midfielder for a lot. So when we actually look at profiling him, he likes to drift in a lot more into the middle than Yamal does. And whereas Nico Williams is very much your out and out wide attacking winger who really likes to drive down the line rather than cut in field. So I think with Rafinha drifting in, that kind of allows room for Williams to play on that side with him. So that's kind of probably what they'll do. But yeah, it's another good option for Flick to have.
It's a very good option for Flick to have. Phil, a lot of football fans would have become aware of Nico Williams in last summer's Euros. Alongside Yamil Namal, they made such a wonderful team. He's only 22, but have you been surprised by his ascent?
I think he does have the potential to be special. I wouldn't say surprised by his ascent because he's 22, so by no means a late developer, but not in the Lamine Yamal bracket of should still be at school doing his GCSEs. You know, he's got a bit more mileage behind him than that. But I sort of never forget that in the final of the Euros, Euro 2024, it wasn't Rodri who was man of the match, got injured obviously, it wasn't Yamal either, it was Nico Williams, and he was properly excellent at that tournament. And I'm actually quite surprised that it's taken 12 months since then for somebody to go all in on him. And I wanted to ask Paul about this because I just wonder whether you think that Williams has been holding out for Barcelona right from the very start. Like, do you think this was his preference all along? But I'm assuming Barca couldn't actually have signed him last season. If they wanted Olmo, say, if they wanted Olmo in front of somebody like Williams, a player of that skill set, then they didn't really seem to have the money to do Olmo, so it's hard to understand how they could have done both. But you were talking about Williams' salary. It's clearly chunky and a lot to take on, but the release clause actually isn't all that wild, is it, by current standards of transfer fees? And I really thought that an opportunistic club would have got in there last summer and would have got it done, would have said, this is a guy that is definitely worth investing in and definitely a bit of a future investment. And you know, why not take him on? Was he happy to bide his time, do you think, in the hope that it would happen this summer?
I think that deep down, like the thing is that it's not an easy signing to pull off. What I said, like about the one-off payment and the big salary, it just takes a lot. Not like every club in the world can afford it. And then last summer, basically, he had doubt because Athletic Club is like a different world inside the Spanish football, and the sort of mentality inside the fans, the culture in Bilbao around the club is just different. The sense of belonging. He has a lot of family ties, not just to the club, but to the area as well, with his brother, with the history, the background that they have. His brother was about to be like in the captain's groups in the team. If it wasn't in a way for Athletic Club, it would have been more difficult for the Williams just to break through in the football stage as they have done it. So there was an emotional connection to that. Plus they had the Europa League quest with the final in San Mamés, which was something that was really written down in the minds of every Athletic Club player. They wanted to do well in that competition and they believed that they could do something big. Then they won the Copa del Rey the season before, which was the first trophy in like many years in Bilbao, and the sort of celebrations, in a way that let all the players know the importance of playing for Athletic. They could feel that they were in a big club. They feel, all the Athletic Club fans, that they are like one of the biggest clubs in the world, and they have the right to believe so in the sort of like different club that they are. So Williams, I think that he was genuinely like attracted by this, and he felt that he could like keep blossoming and like becoming a top player by staying at Athletic Bilbao. But I think that after last season, where possibly the expectation what he did at the Euros, it didn't make him a favor into like shining at his best, especially at the start of the season. And then he goes with the national team and he is back at his best and he plays his best football. He realized that possibly playing with these sort of players, it helps him just to bring the best version out of him. And as I was saying, it wasn't an easy decision for him to make. One, because the salary, because the transfer was a tough one to pull off, and then two, because of the ties, the emotional ties that he has with Bilbao and with Athletic. So
just on that point, you know the story over the weekend about a number of fans defacing the mural of him in Bilbao. Yep. Is that because he's going to Barcelona, i.e. one of the big Spanish clubs, or is it because he's leaving, full stop?
I would say, and that's possibly more my opinion because I'm not from Bilbao and I don't have the full grasp of it, but I would say that it is because he's going to Barcelona, because he's going to the club that is making things look a bit silly in Spanish football, because they get away with it every summer, because they were annoying to the Athletic fan base last summer, trying to pursue Nico Williams to the very end of the transfer window, and because the relationships in the institutional layer between Barcelona and Athletic Club are in a tough spot, are not in the best place right now. So it's basically, him joining a sort of enemy in the Spanish league.
I wanted to touch on something because you spoke about the culture there in Athletic Bilbao. I'm just fascinated, and it just got me thinking of actually a piece that Rory Smith did for the New York Times on the amount of players from that territory, which is only 1.4% of Spanish landmass, have actually produced a quarter of players that have played for the Spanish national team. What's the education there? Like, what are they drinking? What's in the water? Because we haven't even spoken about the managerial talent they've also produced as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I love about the Basque country is that I'm not saying that it's bad to have cities with like two clubs, because it's lovely as well, but those are cities. If you go to Bilbao, you're going to be an Athletic fan, and everyone is just involved with Athletic in all layers of like society, not just like football, but embracing what Athletic means on a weekly basis and giving a focus at the end of the week, and like everyone being represented by the club. So the fact of clubs being representing for one whole city, for me, is a big part of like all players wanting to, dreaming with representing this club. Like their biggest aspiration is to play for Athletic Club, for Real Sociedad, for even Osasuna, because they are big clubs in their society and really important in the community. That's one. And then, I mean, that's what happened in Spain. It's just a source of talent, like an endless source of talent. I think that the good thing that football has is that you can play it. Like, you don't need money to play football. You just need like just a street, a plastic ball if you wanna say it, and a group of friends just to have a kick about. And I think that in a way the culture around football and the education around football is amazing in all sides of Spain and in the Basque country. With the fact of that Athletic Bilbao players, Real Sociedad players and Osasuna players are like role models in that society and in that city, it just gives you like an extra boost to try to be a player and just to try to do your best to play for them. Yeah,
interesting. Let's talk about a player, Conor, that we've not spoken about, and you know, is currently playing for Barca, a bit older than most of them, in fairness, is Robert Lewandowski, and what this potentially could mean for him. I know he's only got maybe a year left on his contract, but you know, would this be a better fit if you sort of take him out of that picture, and then you've got this sort of different approach where you've maybe got like a false nine with Olmo and then Rafinha and then Williams on one side and then obviously Lamine Yamal on the other?
Yeah, I think that's definitely an attractive appeal, that kind of PSG system where, you know, it's a bunch of kind of wide players, attacking midfielders who are all coming in from different angles, interchanging and just causing chaos with the unpredictability. And certainly if those issues with Lewandowski, the fitness issues from the tail end, crunch end of the season persists, that's definitely an attractive system for them, and how difficult it is replacing centre forwards on the market currently. So instead recreating him in the aggregate in that way. But as well as that, it's already suffocating for defenders playing Barca with that high line, that aggressive approach, and suddenly you're having to mark Yamal, Rafinha and Williams within the space of 10 minutes. You know, that's a daunting prospect. But I do think Flick will target Williams for what we know he's good at, and that's staying out wide, stretching the opposition and taking on his man. Barcelona's attacking system last season was excellent, best in Europe, based on just goals alone, over 100. But one criticism that maybe, like one small criticism that can be leveled at them is maybe they were a bit too narrow and predictable against, the low block teams. No team funneled more attacks through the middle than Barcelona, so it is a tiny. The system's really fluid and dynamic, but it's a tiny bit predictable in that sense. So I think with Williams providing them that width, that thread out wide, along with Yamal on the other side, suddenly that's another option. They don't always have to do the quick interchanges through the middle, the dynamic rotations. They have that ability to stretch the game and hurt opposition from other angles. So I think that dynamic system will work, but probably in the short term, it will just be Williams will stick out wide, and maybe going into the future when Lewandowski might fall out of the picture, you might see that kind of more dynamic system evolve.
Yeah, Paul, the Lewandowski thing's interesting because this is still a player that scored 42 goals in all competitions, 27 in La Liga. He's still a useful weapon for them. But as Conor's saying, it actually brings Barcelona into much more of a narrow kind of playing field because obviously he's such a typical centre forward. So you have to either play out wide and then whip it in centrally or basically funnel your play through the middle. But I mean, it's a wonderful problem to have, but could we start to see the sort of phasing out of Robert Lewandowski in that system because he hasn't got left at that club, and who knows if he'll even get a deal again?
No, but that's clear a plan that inside the club, basically they have it and they think about it. Part of the signing of Williams, as Conor was saying here, is just Rafinha played basically as a number 10 this season a lot because he has cut inside a lot. But the plan with Nico Williams is to let Rafinha be more of a free roaming number 10, something like this. Then Deco spoke last week on an interview to local outlet La Vanguardia, and they basically said that they would like as well to play with Dani Olmo as a false nine, that they count on, of course, Lewandowski getting older and possibly not keeping up with the same numbers, which is a totally normal thing. No sort of trying to take a dig at Lewandowski here, but that's something that is expected in the club. And even you can expect Rafinha not to have the same numbers because they were ridiculous last season. And the most normal thing is that even he's a world-class player, but those numbers, they are not going to be repeated season after season. So if you count on this, and then it's something that has been stuck on Flick's mind last season when they had to play against Inter, Real Madrid and Inter, this succession of big games at crunch time last season. Lewandowski was out injured. He had a hamstring problem. And then basically Flick was left with Rafinha, Ferran Torres and Lamine Yamal for all those three games. And when he looked at the bench, there was Ansu Fati and Pau Victor, which are players that possibly are not at the same level, and Flick didn't have the same level of trust. So basically he felt that he lacked depth in that position. That when you look at wingers, I'm going to say only. Of course, any club in the world would like to have them, but they only have Rafinha and Lamine Yamal. You probably need another one in there just to. Yeah, the season is very long. You play in 3 competitions, and a bit of depth in there is required. And I agree with the fact that Nico Williams is going to be used as an out winger, just to stay out wide on the left-hand side, just to provide width, because the only player that could provide that on a regular basis was Lamine Yamal. And I do think that Lamine Yamal has a future at Barcelona drifting inside. I think that he has all the capacities. I think that he would like to do that as well, and it's something that we are going to see progressively in the future. So if you have Nico out wide, possibly it's a way that you can allow Lamine Yamal to drift inside at some point.
Okay, I mean, look, Williams, Yamal, Pedri, Kubasi, Gavi, I mean, the list goes on of young talent. The future looks bright. Anyway, Conor, let's leave you to it. Appreciate your time, and thanks for that insight as well, brother.
Cheers. Thank you.
Well, Paul, we mentioned earlier that Barca have already made their first signing, £21.4 million for the 24-year-old Joan Garcia. Paul, Garcia has become a first-team player, or the first player to join Barca after their city rivals Espanyol in 31 years, and also just the 15th to ever do so at senior level. I mean, what has been the reaction to this? But also, we need to talk about Ter Stegen and what this means for his position as well.
I mean, the reaction has been heated in the city because Espanyol fans are not used to see that, and they have not been happy to see his main player, his star player, an academy player, going to their biggest rivals. But leaving that aside, Barcelona just saw in Joan Garcia a top market opportunity. They knew that they had to do something in the goalkeeping area. Ter Stegen is 33. Then you have Chesney last season, which is old as well. Iñaki Peña is expected to leave the club. So in a way, you needed to do something in there. And Joan Garcia was available now. If you didn't sign him now, he would have gone to somewhere else. People at the club try to resemble this with the Mamardashvili signing for Liverpool, knowing that Liverpool, of course, they have Alisson, but they needed to start thinking about the succession plan, and that's what they did. But with the intention of giving Joan Garcia the number one. Basically, they don't want to do a Mamardashvili of loaning him out for one first season and then taking him back in the following year. Joan Garcia is expected to be given the chance to challenge for the number one spot, which is basically leaving the club captain, Marc-André Ter Stegen, in the toughest spot. Because you speak to people of the club, they would be happy to offload Ter Stegen, even on a free transfer, just like to get his wages off the books, and because they believe that they have a goalkeeper for the long term in Joan Garcia now.
Wow, Ter Stegen, potentially not at Barcelona. Well, actually, I'm going to give a cheeky plug to some we've got coming up on The Athletic, because speaking of players crossing the divided line to join the rivals, check out our summer series on this feed, Transfers That Shook the World. Episode 1 on Fernando Torres, his move from Liverpool to Chelsea, is out right now. All right, Phil, let's talk about Barcelona. Let's get back to it, because look, we've talked about the amount of players they have at their disposal, especially young players. So this feels like a team that's sort of built for the future. But can we expect any more incomings? Do they need any more incomings after such an amazing season last year?
Luis Diaz is the one that interests me at Liverpool. Because he surely won't be that cheap. And also because I guess the one thing that Hansi Flick has to be conscious of is not having more attacking players than he can realistically keep happy. And Paul was sort of highlighting that point at which the resources ran very bare at Barcelona, and there was a really problematic period. But they have got a lot of high caliber footballers, and if you add Diaz to that, another one who would absolutely expect to play. I think they've been really savvy with the goalkeeper. I feel quite sorry for Ter Stegen, because it does feel as if he's been forced out to a certain degree, and it does feel pretty ruthless. But I guess that's football, and neither him nor Chesney are getting younger. Garcia will give them an option for years going forward, and looks like really, really good value, I would say, at the price they've been able to get him. I'm struggling, given that we were talking at the start about levers and finances and everything else. I'm struggling slightly to see how Barca would have the funds to do anything more major, although there do always seem to be avenues to exploit. But the thing that really interests me from this point, and you guys touched on it, is the succession plan for Lewandowski. Will they do a world-class number 9 centre-forward to try and replace him? Will they move to a different system? Given that his contract is up in 2026, it's going to be quite a big decision, for Barca to make sure that they don't commit to him beyond the point where he starts to fade. And again, as Paul sort of referenced, that is going to happen inevitably at some point. But also, given the way things are these days and the way the market's working, it surely can't be that long before Lewandowski is getting tempted by Saudi Arabia or MLS or somewhere like that. So that would seem to be, a kind of obvious move for him somewhere down the line. I think what isn't quite clear yet, or isn't clear to me anyway, and perhaps Paul can properly fill the blank here, is how Barca will cope when a striker who is still scoring a phenomenal number of goals, I mean truly phenomenal, even though he's 36, finally packs up and leaves. Yeah,
is Ferran Torres like the kind of player that Barca feel can hold the line in the same way with such potency? Because he has, the back end of last season, he seemed to come up clutch for Barca a few times.
Yeah, I mean, he had an outstanding season last year, but I don't think that as much as Ferran Torres is a very useful squad member and a player that is happy with the role that he's been given, I don't think that he is seen as an elite caliber sort of a striker or player. What he's really been seeing is as a number 9. If you speak to Barcelona, they don't catalog him as a winger at the minute, they catalog him as a number 9. They prefer him in that position, and he fits a lot with Flick's style in terms of how good he press, how willing he is just to work off the ball. That's something that Flick really wants, and that's something as well that has played against Lewandowski in terms of sometimes Flick want the front line to be relentless and just to press and just to be, and Lewandowski, he doesn't have possibly the like the body capacity is just to keep up with these sort of levels at the biggest stage. And that's why when you speak with people at the club, they take it for given that this is the last season of Lewandowski at the club. And I don't want to like fuel these sort of like top end rumors with Barcelona, but again, inside the club, there's one clear name that is the candidate if they have to replace Lewandowski and they have to go after a big name. There's one clear name in there, which is not going to be cheap, which is liked by everyone in the world, but that is driving Laporte crazy and Hansi Flick loves him as well, which is Julian Alvarez.
Really? From Atletico?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's the name that they love. They would love to have him as a number 9. But yeah, Atletico signed him for 75 million.
That's going to be next summer's levers, Paul. Get the article going.
More VIP seats.
I don't want to talk too loud about this because, this is not going to happen this summer and I'm going to have plenty of work this summer. But it's something that, we should write this name down because it's going to be on Laporta's mind in the near future for sure. So let's see what happens in there. Let's all assume that this is Lewandowski's last season at Barcelona. You feel we're speaking about Luis Diaz. It's going to be or Luis Diaz or Nico Williams. There's no wall that both of them are coming in. So I think that for one of them, there's still room in this team. Let's see what happens in the near future. But next summer is going to be the number 9 talk and potentially like the centre back talk as well, because Íñigo Martínez is going to be a bit older and they are going to need to look for an established partnership for Pau Cubarsí.
Okay, well, you should have just stopped talking when you said Julian Alvarez, mate, who had us all gasping. Well done, Paul. All right, nice one, Jen. So let's end it there. Phil, Paul, and also Connor, who joined us earlier. Thank you so much for your time. We'll be back soon. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.